What's going on, guys? Happy Thanksgiving, and thank you for joining me on this special little podcast thing that I'm doing for you. So I've got a few things in here. First off, happy Thanksgiving to everyone who is in America and currently celebrating Thanksgiving today. Otherwise, happy Thursday, guys. How's it going? So let me give you a quick breakdown of what's going to happen here. First off, I'm going to be giving my thanks. Secondly, I am going to kind of give you some project updates, let you know what's going on in my life. Third, I'm going to read an excerpt from the revised Chapter 9. And I'm going to end things off with a list of 5 awesome things from every Final Fantasy I've played, because I believe this day should be about showing gratitude. And, you know, that's kind of the point of the holiday. So, those of you who are joining me today, thank you for listening. I'm going to try and keep the rambling to a minimum. So, let's get on with it. For starters, giving thanks. Obviously, first and foremost, and I've said it a million times, and I will continue to say it, huge thanks to MJ Gallagher, the author of the Final Fantasy VII unofficial novelization, my lead editor. He's got his own original novel series, and just an astounding writer in general. He's done so much for the fandom, and he's really done so much for this project. I'm telling you, like, every conversation I have with this guy, I get, like, a new level of gold out of him. I mean, like, I cannot possibly overstate his impact on this story. So, a huge thank you to him. Also, thank you to my Patreon Knights, which of course are MJ Gallagher and Matthew Caveat Zealot. Thank you guys so much for supporting me. Huge leap of faith, I know. Thank you for your contribution. It really helps. Also want to thank my beta readers who were doing work. They had been reading up to the point where MJ Gallagher kind of took over. But even so, they were the first to kind of get their eyes on the project. And also just generally been really supportive right along the lines. And they are, of course, I apologize if I'm messing up the names here. My apologies here. Ina Petsnaslo, I think it's something like that. Chantel, just Channy, she knows that. Mike Ficklin, Vader SW1 is what it goes by online. And Lucretia Zimmerman. All you guys, thank you so much. White Mage Wonders, by the way, is her online name. She does a lot around the group, too. You'll see her name pop up more often than not. Also got to give a shout out to Xander Williams, author of the Genova Project, who kind of inspired me to take on this project. I had done a Final Fantasy VII novelization previously. I had one person leave a comment on YouTube saying, you know, I read it and I actually really liked it. Thank you, but I am my own worst critic, and I could have done a lot more with it, and I didn't. But Xander had read that, said, you know, it wasn't bad. You should try to do another one and, like, do it seriously, and, like, put your all into it. And we had one conversation one night, like, 2 years ago. I'm like, okay, I can do it. So, with his blessing, I began writing the Final Fantasy VIII novelization. Also, gotta give some love to, of course, Alan Kenny. Just my bro in general, and a man with whom I am about to have an epic back-and-forth battle in Spyro Reignited Trilogy. We've been doing casual speedruns, competing with each other. Just a little side note there. I'll be doing a Twitch stream later of a speedrun of the original Spyro game via the Spyro Reignited Trilogy. So if you're interested in that at all, it'll be something I share. And just general love to all the folks who have stuck by me and offered help and counsel in what's been an understandably shaky time in my life. I'm freshly divorced. I've been having personal issues that I've been dealing with, and well, there was an ugly period in my life where I lashed out at even my friends, and it was inexcusable, and it was ugly, and even in spite of that, a alarming number of people stepped up and were willing to show me support that I really didn't deserve at the time. So thank you to anybody who has ever been there for me, especially like my oldest friends, you know, Jacob, who I mention once in a while here, Rainey, and then just the crew from the live stream and from Terra Earth forums, who have been really supportive. I sound, like I've got a wealth of friends, but I really only talk to a few people on a day-to-day basis. But everybody who has ever been a part of my life has impacted me in some way. So even if I don't talk to you that often these days, just know that it's been great knowing each and every one of you. So thank you for that. And last and most importantly, of course, I need to give a little thanks to my daughter. I've got a 4-year-old kid who is the freaking light of my life right now. She's at a wonderful age. 4-year-olds are awesome because, they're basically little persons now. And I actually have a video on my personal page where I was showing her Spyro. Oddly enough, it comes back to the Spyro game, I swear. That's not a major part of my life nowadays, except for it is. But no, I was having her play that game, and she was, getting it. She's not great. We're not exactly MLG yet, but she was playing it, and she was having a great time with it. So it's she's getting there. She's communicating very well. She's very clear with what she wants. She's a bit stubborn, but she comes by it honestly. But it's just... she's a great person, and even though we're divorced, her mother is a wonderful person too, and just a great influence. And she's got her mother's brains. I'm telling you right now, she's so freaking smart. So I'm glad that we've reached sort of a state of normalcy, and things are good now. Okay, I realize this was really sappy and kind of very personal, so let's move on to the project updates. Thank you for bearing with me these past 7 minutes. So, project updates. I have had a busy couple of weeks. First off, we had an ice storm here, which caused me to lose power for 2 days. And then that following Sunday, last Sunday, I was actually down at my sister's. We celebrated Thanksgiving early, because that was the time that worked best for everyone. So I've already had my turkey and stuffing that y'all will hopefully be enjoying today. And I ended up staying an extra day. I ended up leaving around Monday evening. Just because I never see her. She lives 200 miles away on the coast, so I never get to hang out with her. But I ended up taking some family time, and as a result, I haven't done much in the way of updates. However, I have been busting my ass on Chapter 9. You'll be hearing a preview here in a bit. Massively expanding the chapter, as MJ Gallagher pointed out earlier. And yes, I realize I always say his full name. It's just a good name, guys. It's like J.R.R. Tolkien, it's a good name. But no, as MJ pointed out earlier, Chapter 9, and Chapter 8 too, but Chapter 9 especially, really needed work. I massively rushed it. It was a botched job. And the thing is, I'm writing what I'm writing now, and I'm still knowing I'm going to have to go back and tidy some stuff up between the chapters, but, one thing at a time. But there's been a lot I've added to it. The chapter has almost tripled in size from stuff I've had to add. It's coming out great. I love the product, and I'm recording this a day in advance. If all goes well, it should be released today. Let me rephrase that. I am busting my ass to make sure, come hell or high water, it is released today. My daughter won't be with me on Thanksgiving Day, lay sad, but she is going to visit family. So I will actually have the day off, so to speak. I work Thanksgiving night because, holiday pay. So if it isn't out by Thursday morning, it will be out Thursday afternoon. If I have to smack myself stupid until it gets done, it will happen. On a similar note, Final Fantasy VII Comparison Series, Part 7. Script is done, I just gotta record it, and there are a few other things I'm doing. Of course, the Nibelheim Incident writer that I do, I'm gonna read the chapters for that. It should be out by Friday or Saturday, so coming very soon. I haven't been just sitting here dawdling, although I have been playing a lot of video games, I'm not gonna lie, but it's just been, with everything going on, I've needed kind of a break, so I just hope you understand. There hasn't been any plans for a new FF8 Trivia Minute yet. I'm still trying to think of a topic, guys. I had 3 really good ones back like that, and now I'm just kind of like, okay, but what else? I think it's gonna happen is, as I'm doing research for, the next part of the book, I'll find something that I want to expound upon. So hopefully you see one maybe early December. And I have 2 top 10 lists that are actually going to be kind of twins. They're my top 10 favorite story moments and playable moments in Final Fantasy. Those should be out next week. The lists are done, the scripts are written, it's just a matter of finding images and so forth. I'm hoping they'll be out early next week, Tuesday, Wednesday. Maybe one of them like early in the week and then the other one later in the week. But we will see how things go. So, that covers project updates, I think. Oh, Twisted Fantasy. I may as well mention it while I'm here. I'm writing the 3rd part now, Final Fantasy III as a science fiction. Kind of inspired by the Augusta Tower sequence of Final Fantasy 13-2. Oddly enough, I'm not doing 13-2 on this pass, but maybe later. Where the Crystal Tower and all the science fiction-y elements of it are kind of like... well, I don't want to give too much away, but you can kind of imagine where I'm going with it, and the idea of the job crystals kind of being more than what they seem. I'm having fun writing it. It's a bit of a mind bender. I like kind of stuff like that. But I have released publicly. I've released Patreon gets it a week early, so they've already seen it, if not read it. But I released on Tuesday Dances with Beavers, which is part 2. It's a Final Fantasy II piece written as an animal adventure starring Guy. And it kind of evolved on me, and I wasn't expecting this, but it kind of turned into a character study of Guy, talking a lot about his backstory and how he was raised by animals. I didn't know that until I studied for the thing. But the thing turned into a 14-page behemoth. I was supposed to be doing, like, short stories, one-shots, and this is like, nah, just do 14 pages, just keep writing because you're not satisfied. And it ends up covering the entire Snow Cavern sequence of the game, or at least, 95% of it. So it turned out a lot better than I was expecting, to be honest. I'm actually quite proud of it. So if you get a chance, and if it's your bag, give it a read. Okay, so now we're done with the project updates. And let's go ahead and move on to what I've promised you here. I did promise you I'd read an excerpt from Chapter 9 of my book. This is from the revised edition. I'm not going to read the entire thing because it is pretty long. But here is an excerpt for you all. Ooh, that's not good. Microsoft Word can be finicky at times. If you're trying to scroll down one page with the scroll bar, it's like, oh, you want to drop down 20 pages? Okay. And don't even get me started on trying to format in this thing. Have you ever, this is a common joke, I know, but anybody who's ever written using Microsoft Word knows it's impossible to get your tabs exactly the way you want them unless you manually adjust the ruler, and even then it's a pain in the ass. Because you could just be trying, okay, I want this line to go over so that it matches the rest, if you're doing like a bulleted list. And then it's like, nope, I'm gonna screw up the entire document! And don't even get me started on frickin' adding photos. Anyways, that's my little mini rant. Oh, by the by, I'm going to be changing the chapter title, because the satellite tower no longer works. I'm probably just going to be changing the title to Dole. By the way, argue in the comments below, is it pronounced Dole or Dalit? Because to me, I'm thinking very French-inspired, so I'm thinking Dole, which I think E-T would be an A sound in French. Am I wrong? I'm probably wrong about that. But somebody tell me. I've always pronounced it Dole. Then again, I've always pronounced Quistis, or Kistis, Quistis. But I've heard that it's actually pronounced Kistis, or Kisti, or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce anything is what I'm getting at here. Okay. An hour passed, and yet time seemed to stand still. The sky's crimson hue deepened as the sun dipped below the mountains. The enormous moon rose slowly, now nearing its zenith. Every time Squall glanced at his watch, only a few minutes had ticked off on the digital display. They were alone, silent except for the distant sounds of battle. As the din trailed further away, Cypher grew more agitated. Zell had taken the time to stack the bodies of the enemies alongside the road, but that hadn't taken him long, withered as they were. Moon's pretty big, huh? Zell said, as if he was looking for something to bring an end to the silence. Astonishing observation. No wonder you're the top of your class, Sniper siped. Sniper siped. Cipher sniped. I'm doing this live, can you tell? Astonishing observation. No wonder you're the top of your class, Cipher sniped, grinding his boot into the cobblestone. I meant in the sky, Zell said, pointing up towards the heavens. Squall turned his gaze skywards, trailing up the side of the Hotel Delay. It seemed like one of the largest buildings in town, although much of its height was ornamental. At the top of the brick structure was a domed bell tower with a wonderfully restored analog clock facing the plaza. The hour marks were numbered using characters from the ancient Cetran language. Hardly anybody could read the long-dead language, but the uniform placement made it easy enough to interpret. Above the bell tower, hanging in the crimson field above them, was the moon. Despite being fathoms away in reality, it felt as though one could reach into the air and pluck it out of the sky. It's just your imagination, Cipher said in mock sympathy. I promise you the sky isn't falling. I know that, Captain, Zell said, restraining himself at the last moment. He was, after all, being tested. I just think it's interesting. They taught us that the moon goes through cycles, you know, where it moves closer to the planet during some years and further away after. Squall was mildly curious, but it seemed a weird time to discuss such things. There wasn't much to do, to be sure, but there had to be better ways to spend their time. With no additional commentary, Cipher was too busy being irritated at the boredom, and Squall simply didn't care. Silence resumed. Zell entertained himself by studying the fountain, muttering to himself as though he were trying to goad the others into asking him to share his oh-so-precious information. Every few seconds he would turn to face towards them. Squall only noticed because of the flash of his stupid face tattoo in his peripheral vision. The bell tower tolled 7 times, 1900 hours. Squall let out a small sigh. The waiting was getting to him even... The waiting was even getting to him now. Cipher reached a gloved hand up to his forehead and touched the scar he'd received from Squall. Squall had only just noticed that the partner wound he'd given Cipher had, like his, miraculously recovered. GF healing is a great thing, Cipher said, turning to Squall. It's a good thing for you, too. Oh? Squall muttered. He turned away from Cipher defensively. His comment had been more reactionary than intentional. Oh yeah, you're lucky I only gave you a scar. I could have easily done worse, you know. And in a real fight, you won't get to go whinging to teacher about it, Cipher sneered. You seem to be the one whinging, Squall thought, refusing to face Cipher. Cipher dusted off the sleeve of his trench coat and began to survey the surroundings. Squall wasn't sure there was anything that he could say to Cipher that would be remotely constructive, and, like Zell, he realized that this was an exam. My real test is putting up with him, Squall mused, folding his arms. His shaggy hair blew about gently as a calm evening breeze flowed through the narrow streets of Delay. And I'm going to wrap it up there. And that, by the way, is just like the first section, like the first 2 pages or so of the chapter. There's a lot more behind that. The chapter ends when they're already on the mountain path, and the guards haven't even come by yet. So that gives you a little taste of what's coming, and, you know, if you want to read the whole chapter, it should be up today, I hope. And now we're going to wrap this thing up, but it's going to be a kind of a long wrap-up, so you can leave here if you like, but this is going to be me briefly discussing my 5 favorite things from every Final Fantasy game that I've played. So, if you're leaving here, happy Thanksgiving, and thank you for listening to this, and tolerating my rambling and my kind of awkward performance in the middle there. I tried to keep it as level as possible, but again, once everything is said and done, I do intend to do an audiobook version, which will be significantly better quality, rest assured. But I just like recording, and let's be honest, I like hearing the sound of my own voice. That's really what it boils down to. I swear that's more self-denigrating than you think. I'm not trying to be that obnoxious. But thank you so much, guys. It's been great having you. Happy Thanksgiving. And now, this is me just ranting about Final Fantasy. 5 awesome things from each FF that I've played. Final Fantasy 1. It started the series, obviously. Number 2, the jobs and the party makeup made it more replayable. It was amazing being able to start each game over and be like, what'll happen if I do 4 warriors? You'll win. That's what will happen, my friend. You will win. Number 3, the prelude and the anthem both started in this game. Number 4, all of the freaking D&D references. Is it kind of cheap? Yeah. Do I love it? Of course. I'm just sad that they changed it from Beholder to Mind Flayer. Or Evil Eye, or whatever it was. Mind Flayer was changed to Pisco Demon. Finally, the main theme of Final Fantasy I. Gorgeous. Top tier music. I mean, seriously, it's one of the best main themes in the series. You're going to hear that a lot in this list. Final Fantasy II. I like the level up system in theory, even though it didn't work in practice. I should probably play the Saga games, huh? Number 2, the overworld theme, here we go, is one of the strongest in the series. I mean, it really is. I love the forlorn sadness to it, the way it's just kind of like haunting and eerie. I like that. I've already said before, I like creepy stuff, so that's why. Number 3, this is the birthplace of Cid, Chocobos, Dragoons, and Ultima, which ties into number 4. It's the game that gave Final Fantasy its own identity. Final Fantasy I was pretty much, as I mentioned before, littered in D&D references. Final Fantasy II, despite its flaws, is really what set it apart from every other fantasy game out there. This gave Final Fantasy its presence. And finally, the Ask system. Again, in theory. It wasn't that great in practice, but I really like the idea of using the keywords and asking about that. It could have been cool. And again, this was NES. Or, Famicom, I guess, when it came out. But utilized today, much like, we have with, like, the BioWare games, that could have been pretty amazing. So, I like it in theory. I like a lot about the stuff in Final Fantasy II in theory, but, Final Fantasy III, number 1. It's the birthplace of the job system as we know it. Again, wasn't implemented the greatest, but, hey, it started it. Number 2, it was the first game with multiple overworlds. That's actually, and it goes whole hog. You've got the floating continent, you've got the world covered in darkness, and then you've got the world not covered in darkness, and it's just going out there the first time. I played the 3D version on PSP, and man, going out of the floating continent for the first time and just seeing that sea of darkness, it's just awesome. Number 3, the final dungeons, which were admittedly kind of a slog in practice, were really cool conceptually. How cool were they? They became the first Final Fantasy XIV 24-man raid. That's how cool they are. Number 4, it's the first one to use an underwater map. Oh yeah, I forgot, there's also an underwater map in the main world. So, the main world and I think in the floating continent. I'm not certain. It's been a while. And number 5, it's the birthplace of Moogles, guys. They're the servants of Doga and Dune, just down there in the south, chilling. It's awesome. Final Fantasy IV, number 1, one of the strongest stories in the series. I mean, seriously, it's up there. It's really freaking good. Number 2, Cecil is, to this day, my favorite character in the franchise. I love him grappling with the sins he committed and seeking redemption for them. It's not, he doesn't get a pass. He doesn't, oh, you were just mind controlled, like they use that plot point 17 times in this game. He wasn't just, he did it. He was under orders, yes, but he still did those things. He had to atone for them. I wish they had done a little bit more with it, and the DS version apparently does expand that a little bit, but still, it's such a huge arc, and it's also the game that made me love paladins as a concept, so there's that. Number 3, getting my numbers mixed up here. Number 3, the moon. Everything about it. Traveling on the surface of the moon, the Lunarian story, the background, everything about it. The lunar whale, just the moon. I love the moon in Final Fantasy IV. Number 4, the combat system and the birthplace of the ATB. Both are fantastic, and combat has such a wonderful flow. And it was early ATB. It was the first implementation. There were some hiccups, but still, combat is a frickin' joy in FF4. And number 5, it has one of the essential Final Fantasy soundtracks. I'm talking Japanese school children are taught to play the theme of love. That's how essential, like, if you're, like, what soundtrack should you begin with if you're trying to get somebody into just the music of Final Fantasy? Start with 6, 4 is immediately after. And then 10. And then 9, and then 8, and 7, and so forth. But go on. Final Fantasy V, number 1. It perfected the job system. To this day, Final Fantasy V is the job system game. It is absolutely the top tier. Number 2, the world-splitting storyline and how the two came together in the end was actually brilliant. I love it. Now, this is actually going to be featuring in a list in the future, but I love how the two worlds come together and how once you're in the third world, you get to explore and see how everything has kind of been placed next to each other. It's even to this day, I love exploring the third world. It's one of the best parts of the game. Number 3, this is the first place we meet Gilgamesh, and I freaking love Gilgamesh. Number 4, it is arguably the most replayable Final Fantasy game. Look up the 4-job Fiesta, for example. And number 5, this isn't a popular point, but to me at least, I'd say it has some of the best dungeon design in the series. I love the dungeons in Final Fantasy V. They all really stand out and are really very distinct from each other. With the exception of maybe a few of the caves, I could point to a dungeon background and be like, oh, I know exactly where that is. Can't do that in all the games, especially the NES ones. Final Fantasy VI, here we go. Number 1, I consider this to be, objectively, the best game in the series. Best music, best gameplay, best story, best characters. It excels at everything. That's kind of a big point. I could probably leave it here, but I'm not going to. Number 2, the freaking opera scene, guys. Come on now. Number 3, the freaking final boss and ending themes, guys. Come on now. Dancing Mad, which is the best final boss theme in probably any game, and the ending medley, which to this day remains the longest recorded track in Final Fantasy. Although I think somebody said a track from Oddly Lightning Returns recently surpassed it, which is kind of weird. So fact check that statement, but at least until recently, it was the longest recorded track in history. In Final Fantasy history, that is. Number 4, Suplex the Train. And honestly, the Phantom Train by itself deserves a mention as well. I consider it like one of the best dungeons in the franchise, if not the best. I love it that much. Number 5, the Esper system. It was just a good leveling system. It was very, because each character already had their own unique skills, and they all felt unique because of that. Then, giving everybody the ability to learn magic through Espers, and having those have level up bonuses as well, it was a nice touch. It really helped you create a custom party the way you wanted. Final Fantasy VII, number 1, Aerith and everything about her character and story. We all know that scene by now. I'm not going to bother mentioning it. Number 2, the music, particularly One-Winged Angel, Aerith's theme, and the main theme of Final Fantasy VII. All amazing standouts. Number 3, the Materia system. To this day, I consider the Materia system to be the best progression system in the series. It's just so freaking versatile. Everything about it is so well thought out. Number 4, Gold Saucer and everything to do with it. Also, shout out to the Fort Condor battles. I know a lot of people didn't like those, but I love them. I would keep a save file before the final Fort Condor fight so that I could always go back and play it whenever I wanted to. And number 5, the story. It's so complex and open-ended and is just one of the best stories out there. And I'm repeating myself a lot, but really, Final Fantasy can write a damn story. Dirge of Cerberus. Number 1, the shooter mechanics were actually pretty fun. They were highly unrefined. It was no Halo, it was no Call of Duty, it was no... Hell, it wasn't even a GoldenEye, but it was still pretty fun. Number 2, the J-Rock soundtrack kicks so much ass. I love Gact. Number 3, the bonus missions on the disc were actually super fun. The Labyrinth one, I'm pretty certain, is impossible without a guide, but it's still pretty fun. Number 4, it gave us a great closer look at Vincent and Lucretia, two characters who really needed more love from the game. 5, it had the guts to try something different and not center around the main cast. Everybody showed up, but it's mostly about Vincent, Ketchi, and Yuffie. Reeve, I guess, and Ketchi. Which, by the way, I still will say Kate Sith, because I'm stupid. But, you know, it happens. Crisis Core. Number 1, Final Fantasy on the go. Yes, please. Number 2, the materia system somehow got even better. I really love the materia melding. It was just a good concept. It was kind of weird in the combat system that they had set up, the kind of like pseudo-action-y one, but it was still pretty good. Number 3, the multiple side missions always gave you something to do, even if, yes, they were pretty repetitive. Number 4, the story is, of course, massively engaging. And yes, I know I didn't finish this one, but I did watch all the cutscenes on YouTube, so I know the story pretty well. Not as good as I could, but I get the gist of it. Number 5, I loved hearing the remasters of all the various classic Final Fantasy VII songs with that amazing guitar work. There's just so much going on there, and it's Price of Freedom is just amazing by itself, but like hearing like Anxious Heart done, especially with the new style of Crisis Core, was just amazing. Okay, Final Fantasy Tactics. Number 1, amazing tactical gameplay that I didn't know I wanted, but I now love. Props to John Barrett for getting me into it. Number 2, actually one of the best stories in the series. And again, I know I'm repeating myself, but come on! If I rated this game in with the main franchise games, it would probably my number 2 or number 3 spot in the list, okay? That's how good it is. Number 3, the Easter eggs and references to the other Final Fantasy games, including being able to recruit Cloud in the original version and Balthier in the remake. Number 4, one of the best implementations of the job system, adding that tactical edge to the jobs, giving them movement abilities and counters and unique passive abilities. And the fact that you could multi-class made it even better. Pro tip, get a calculator in your party as soon as possible, teach them all the abilities, then level them in Ninja so they're fast. You will destroy everything in sight. And number 5, Agrias. Just Agrias. Best girl. Final Fantasy VIII. Here we go. Number 1. Yes, it's broken, but I actually really love the junction system. I think it has a lot of potential, and there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with it. Number 2, Triple Triad, and everything that goes along with it, especially card modding. I loved abusing that system so much. Number 3, I don't care what y'all say, Squall is an amazing protagonist. He's not exactly well loved by the community, but I find his anti-hero disattachment to be quite endearing. He's cold and confident, but when we find out what's under his skin, it makes him all the more appealing. And he's a stone-cold badass who gets shit done. Number 4, I love the little things that made the world feel more complete. The trains, the cars, even the magazines. I like those little aesthetic touches that made this world resemble the one that I live in and made it feel more alive. Number 5, it has some of the best places in the series. Balam Garden is my favorite starting area in any of these games. Ultimisia's Castle, depending upon the day you ask me, is in my top 3 final dungeons. Final Fantasy IX. It was designed to be, and succeeded at being, a love letter to the entire series up to this point. Number 2, the weapon skill and synthesis systems were absolutely incredible. So much fun. The best part about getting to Lindblum is being able to start synthesizing. It's awesome. Number 3, Memoria is always my number 1 final dungeon. It is a damn good final dungeon. Number 4, Vivi. Just Vivi. And number 5, the Chocobo Hot and Cold minigame and everything that led to were absolutely fantastic. Top tier, one of the best minigames in the franchise. Final Fantasy X. Number 1, Blitzball is awesome and I loved every second of it. Number 2, The sphere grid is an amazing concept. It's probably the second best leveling system in the series. Number 3, the first game with voice acting, and not all of it is that terrible Titus laugh. Number 4, the fact that it made every member of your party usable in battle and gave each of them a role to play. Except Kimari, but he was basically your mime. I always made him follow Riku's path, so that you could get a second person to use Albed potions. And, you know, a second stealer was always very handy to have. And 5, it had the balls to have a sad ending. And it was one of the best endings in the series, if not the best. Maybe second only to Final Fantasy VI. I legitimately cannot get through the final cutscene without tearing up. It's stellar. Final Fantasy X-2. Okay. This game was actually really fun, with a lot of cool side quests and minigames to partake in. Number 2, I actually think the Dress Sphere system was kind of a fun strategy, even if it was admittedly pretty exploitative. Number 3, the chapter-based storytelling for each area is a really fascinating way to tell a story, and it gets you really invested in the world storyline. Like seeing that episode complete in Chapter 5 for each area, you really feel like you've contributed to the world. Number 4, the faction-based storytelling was also pretty awesome, and it lends replayability to the game, which is good because, number 5, New Game Plus. And I think this is the only numbered title that has it besides Lightning Returns. There's a sort of New Game Plus in 13.2, but the main purpose of New Game Plus in here is not just to play it with, you know, stronger abilities, but to get that 100% or higher than 100% story rating. Because you can play the game the next time, instead of being New Yevon, you could be with, you know, the Youth League. So, there's just a lot going on there, and it's awesome. Plus, if you don't mind watching Genocide, you can get a really cool item, so there's that. I may have let the Guado die a few times. I'm sorry. Final Fantasy XI. I never played this game, so I can't say much about it. Number 2, Shan Toto. I know her. Final Fantasy XII. The semi-open world that actually made exploring pretty fun. Number 2. Now this is kind of a personal point, but I always thought traveling by airship and being able to wander around on deck was really comfy and fun. It really, I don't know, it's a silly, like I say, it's a silly personal point. I liked it, okay? I liked traveling by airship in 12, okay? Number 3, the mark system was awesome. Number 4, the license board system was also pretty awesome in my opinion. I would literally spend a lot of time in the early game wandering around the Giza Plains and the Damaska Estersand, just building up kills and getting high chains so that I could get a lot of license points early on, so that later, when all my other characters joined in, they had like 2,000 license points built up. Yeah, like I say, I kind of messed around with that one. And number 5, Rabanastre is a great capital city, and probably one of the best capitals in the franchise. Final Fantasy XIII. Okay, here we go. Number 1, it actually had a pretty good story. Number 2, the combat system was pretty engaging when it finally opened up on Disc 3. Once you finally got to Grand Pulse, it was actually pretty tolerable. Which brings you to number 3. Grand Pulse was really beautiful. Like, I had my doubts going into it. I was like, I saw the screenshots, I'm like, it looks like a glorified Calmlands. But there's actually a lot more to it. So, I gotta give credit where it's due. It was a really nice world. Number 4, Saz and everything to do with him. I fucking love that guy. He has some of the best music, too. And number 5, speaking of music, a really solid soundtrack, including what I consider one of the best battle themes in the franchise. I mean, say what you will, but Blinded by Light is freaking awesome. Final Fantasy XIII 2. Number 1, it fixed all of 13's mistakes. Most of them, at least. Number 2, a really fun, engaging, and kind of creepy time travel plot, especially with the multiple endings. Number 3, the monster raising system was really cool. Number 4, Serendipity, at least after you got the SAS DLC, which had a lot of fun minigames in it. I mean, yeah, you had the slots and the races, but, I mean, come on, those weren't much. When you added the SAS DLC, you got Texas Hold'em, and you got that other card game, Chrono Stop or something like that. I can't remember the name of it, but I remember having a lot of fun playing it. The DLC itself was kind of crap, but it was worth it for those minigames, in my humble opinion. It's the only DLC worth getting, frankly. The arenas were ridiculous. I'm not into the super high-level combat. Maybe you were. And the Lightning one was just a joke. Don't get the Lightning DLC. It has a little capper of an ending if you decide that fighting the same fight 300 times is totally worth it to you. It wasn't for me. I did finally beat it, but I'm just like, that was not worth it. Okay, enough of that nonsense. Number 5. I actually really like Noel Kreis and Caius. I think they're both great characters. Sarah's okay, but I didn't find her as engaging as Noel and Caius. The rivalry they had, the history of Noel being the last human alive, and their connection to Yule made them inherently more compelling. Sarah's connection was to Lightning, yes, and Lightning does feature heavily in the story, but I can't help but say it always feels like kind of a side story to what's really going on between Caius and Noel. We're on to the next game. Lightning Returns. Number 1, the combat is incredible. Again, say what you want about that game, the combat system is amazing. Even people who didn't like the game go, okay, but the combat's awesome. Number 2, the world was so dark and atmospheric, and it really felt alive, at least to me. Despite the fact that it's ironically a dying world, I really felt super engaged in these areas. Number 3, the ability to drive monsters to extinction and the bonus dungeon at the end really improved the creep factor of the game. This is a great Final Fantasy to play around like Halloween, by the way, because it's super creepy. Number 4, the ticking clock was actually a good device. I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I think once you learned how to control it with chronostasis, and once you learned how to effectively manage your time, a lot easier on a New Game Plus, I'll admit, it was just enough of a concern to push you forward without feeling too restrictive. And finally, New Game Plus, which, again, is actually kind of essential in this game. To be honest, I couldn't beat the game on a first playthrough. I ended up dying and then using my status to go forward with a New Game Plus. Which I recommend you just, if you're going to play the game, go into your first playthrough focusing on grinding levels, and completing some of the easier side quests, just knowing that you're building experience for the next go-around. It's possible to do it on a first playthrough, but it's a lot easier on New Game Plus. Final Fantasy XIV, I'm just focusing on the game as a whole, because if I did all the expansions, this would be even longer, and I'm not doing that. So, okay, Final Fantasy XIV. The fact that it started out terrible and managed to save itself with the remake is just an inspiring story of video games. Watch The Fall and Rise of Final Fantasy XIV by Speakers Network if you haven't. It details the whole headache of that game and how it became something amazing. So please give that a watch if you can. Number 2, each expansion and patch adds something awesome to an already incredible game. Though I think I can safely say that Heavensward had the best overall experience so far. I don't not like Stormblood. It has okay content and has a really good story, but I mean, it has Eureka. Then again, Heavensward had Diadem, so pick your poison. Number 3, the game is littered with Final Fantasy references and Easter eggs, and in many ways feels like a true modern successor to the series. Number 4, the story, while obviously quite long because of the nature of MMOs, is told really well, particularly once you get to patch like 2.3 or so, and it features some amazing set pieces, characters, and worlds. Just, if you're not playing it, do yourself a favor. It's an amazing game. It'll take you forever to get through, but that means you'll have a lot more fun. And number 5, and this is a personal point for me because I also play WoW, the player housing system is awesome, and it really opens up possibilities, especially for the roleplay community, which is really active in this game. Everywhere is Goldshire in here. WoW players will get that. Finally, oh goodness, finally, Final Fantasy 15. Number 1, the 4 bros are some of the most natural and believable characters ever written. Yes, that's a hot take, and I'm standing by it. They are some of the most realistic characters in the franchise. Their interactions, while admittedly slightly angsty, feel so frickin' genuine. Number 2, travel is fun. The Regalia is just fun to ride around in, be it on-road, off-road, or in flight. Though admittedly I don't use the off-road that often. I think it's just kind of a gimmick. Why use off-road when you have chocobos? The game is also, this is tied into point 2, made for riding chocobos around on an adventure instead of just a means of transit. They're really fun to ride around on. And apparently the Regal Edition has a boat now, which you can travel around in the ocean and do a few fishing spots. Cool. When we get in the next continent. Oh, that's right, never. I'm sorry, that was a random burst of bitterness there at the end. I'm sorry, guys, that was not on theme. Number 3. The backpacking atmosphere makes the game really feel like a man versus environment story, and to an extent it is. It has the camping, the foraging, the fishing for food, hunting beasts, and so forth. In fact, in my New Game Plus, what I've been doing is trying to use the Regalia as little as possible, and having them, like, hike across the world, very much, you know, like you're on a backpacking trip. And it makes the world feel a lot more massive, for one thing, but you really get to appreciate a lot of the fine details. Because even though the world map maybe isn't as big as we had been led to believe, it's still freaking massive, and there's a lot of attention to detail. I really wish we'd gotten that second continent. It looked awesome, and some of the videos you've seen where people are breaking the boundaries and going out and exploring, it looked like it could have been a lot of fun. Number 4, it gets a lot of hate, but I actually really like Chapter 13 of the game. I thought it was tense and punishing and creepy. Felt like a survival horror game for a brief period. And it made things really amp up. Yes, it was definitely a touch long. Should have been trimmed a bit. But I really liked it. I know I'm kind of in the minority there, but hey. I mean, to be fair, I had just played Silent Hill 3 around the time I got to that point, so maybe I was just in the mood for it. But, you know, I thought it was alright. And number 5... Speaking of controversial statements, Piteos may be my favorite hidden dungeon in the series. And yes, I realize that's pretty controversial, but Piteos is just such a well-designed dungeon. I love it. I love it. I love it. I had so much fun. It made me pull my hair out, but I love it. So, there. Okay, so we're done, the pod. Man, that was long. I only cut once to get a drink of water. I think maybe another time earlier in there, but I'm not counting really. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to all that noise. If such a thing interests you, I wonder how many of you actually made it this far. And if you did, give yourself a pat on the back, because this has been a, good lord, 48-minute long monstrosity. I'm going to wrap it up here. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for everything that you do. And I hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving. And to those of you not celebrating Thanksgiving, have a great weekend. And I look forward to talking to you on the, Facebook page or anywhere I happen to see you. Thank you guys so much for listening to me ramble, and you have a wonderful day.